to moderate our discussion today and had to step away for obvious reasons. But a number of you may remember Koki and the quality of journalism she gave, but also the kind of support she's given to many organizations in our area, both she and Steve, and not only in our area, but around the world. And so we're feeling that loss, and we think it's important in this series of conversations on workplace well-being to acknowledge that up front, to acknowledge the human dimension of what many may be feeling at a time like this, while also recognizing that, as so often, we take those experiences and we integrate them into the need to go on with our work.
Thank you, Kip. Thank you so much for that. Our hearts go out to Steve Roberts right now. Well, I'm going to start introducing our panelists today. I have here with me Jennifer Hester, who's Vice President of Human Resources at the MS Company. She has over 20 years of experience working in private and publicly traded and government contracting organizations. By leading global human capital management initiatives with countless business environments, Jennifer has developed a career of positive impact to people and organizations through strategic change management. Great to have you here with us, Jennifer. I also have here with me Waialia Chase, who brings more than 15 years of nonprofit and corporate experience to Leadership Montgomery. As Director of Partnerships and Corporate Engagement, Waialia oversees the Corporate Volunteer Council program, which connects businesses and professionals with structured volunteer and community engagement opportunities in Montgomery County. Good to have you with us, Waialia. And finally, and you heard his voice already, it's Kip Ingram, our Director of Bereavement Care at Montgomery Hospice. Kip is overseeing the bereavement care at Montgomery Hospice, and he has over 19 years doing this kind of work, directing and supporting and serving our community. He also has good experience serving diverse populations and incorporating theological, philosophical, and psychological dynamics of grief. In 2012, his work was featured at the Montgomery Hospice Conference, where he talked about meaning-making when one person is grieving. So Mr. Ingram, we know him as Kip, has written several articles in the field of grief and that we've published in previous Montgomery Hospice newsletters. So very glad to have you all here today. And we are going to turn the PowerPoint on. I'm sorry I didn't show the audience your photos, but now they are seeing your photos. Sorry, I was distracted. So we are going to start talking about our core themes, and we have 6 core themes today that we want to cover. And we're sort of dividing our session first onboarding and then offboarding. But these core themes go throughout both onboarding and offboarding. So we want to talk about trust, honesty, wellness, values, financial implications of all these, and we want to help the audience think about minimizing surprises as we move in this process. So we're starting with some data about organizations with a strong onboarding process improve new hire retention by 82%. And productivity by 70%. These are very high percentages. On the other hand, a negative onboarding experience can result in a person being twice more likely to look for other opportunities. So we just are trying to make the case that this is a very important conversation for all of us to have. And if you're in the audience, you know you have these little sidebar on the right side of your screen. And if you have questions, feel free to write them down, and we are going to be happy to stop and respond to the questions as they appear in this chat box. So we are going to first talk about employee onboarding best practices. So we were talking about organizing the house as if we had guests coming in. These guests are going to live with us for a long time. So I want to invite Jennifer to first chime in. And how do we clean our corporate houses.
So I really do appreciate the analogy of organizing and preparing for a new hire like you would prepare for a guest. I think that we often do not look at employees as guests, as people who are here to stay, obviously voluntarily, but they do, of course, have the option to leave anytime they so choose. And when we're looking at how we prepare for new employees, and the things that we do, it's interesting that some of the things that we think are common sense when we have people over to our homes, we actually don't do for our own staff. And those are things like, number one, first and foremost, make sure that you are there when the people arrive. And so that means making sure that you have the appropriate points of contact ready and able to greet your new staff member. It's making sure that you confirm with them the day and the time that they're there, from making sure that they have their right tools and equipment and in order to do their job for the first day. And also just making sure that everything is ready. When you have an opportunity to make, and I'm going to say another first impression, because the first impression was during the interview period, the second first impression is, on their new day, you want to make sure that they get the feeling that you're prepared, that you're ready, and that most importantly, you are happy to see them and happy that they are there.
Right, and you were talking about giving them instructions about where to park, whether you need to bring lunch, and those things kind of make you stress or not stress when you're coming on your first day for work.
Exactly. Just as though you would give a guest directions on how to get to your home if they hadn't been there before, you would tell them where to park. If for some reason parking was tricky, you would do the exact same thing for a new employee. And similar to today, and life, can often throw people curveballs. You never know what's happened to that employee prior to coming on board and starting that first morning. And so relieving as much stress from that experience as you can, because starting a new job is just stressful in itself. You're going from a place that maybe you have known and are used to the routine of that place to a place that's completely foreign, where the bathroom is, what people do on a day-to-day basis, how to just get into the building, how to get to their office, where to find some of the supplies that they may need, completely foreign to that individual. So by giving them as much information in advance about what to expect on that first day can definitely make that day more successful for not just the new employee, but for the organization as well.
Right, sort of having a computer and a way to get into your computer if your work is computer related. But Kip, you were talking about other practices that we have here in your department that are a way to make people feel welcome.
Sometimes there are informal, small things you can do to add that sense of welcome and add it with a human touch. In my department, when we have a new person who's coming in, all of the staff in advance decorate either their office or their cubicle, bright colors, and they put their own kind of unique words that they want to offer, so that when the person comes in, they recognize that something's been done for them as they come in. And it gives the impression not that we think you should feel lucky to be here, but we feel lucky to have you here. And we're excited about you being here. And that begins to set the momentum for what hopefully is going to be a successful career with someone working in our organization. It's
a very different attitude from some of the others that we feel in the corporate world, that you should be happy to be here. But it's the other way around. We're grateful that you're here with us to start. And you were talking about your first day at Leadership Montgomery. Wailia, do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, my first day at Leadership Montgomery, what we were talking about earlier is the fact that you don't have to be a big company with lots of money to do a flashy intro for the first day. We have lots of nonprofits here in Montgomery County that Leadership Montgomery is fortunate to have a relationship with, and there's not a lot of money. And so, but you can still have a wonderful, welcoming onboarding process. And at Leadership Montgomery, I benefited from that. It was as simple as being able to send around a menu, everybody order what they want, get together in the conference room, and everybody welcomed me. And to Jennifer's point earlier, they all knew I was coming. They all expected me, and it wasn't heads down and everybody attending to themselves, but they were attending to me. And everybody went around the room and said something personal that let me know the culture of the organization, and that, it confirmed that I was where I wanted to be, and that it was going to be a good place to be. And it was, like I said, it was simple. It was a simple lunch in the conference room, just all getting together. And, a lot of times people think, oh, let's go to a restaurant. That's noisy. It can be impersonal, and like I said, it was just simple and it was nice. And you can do that in a large company with a lot of money or in a small nonprofit with not a lot of money. It works the same.
And I like that people said something personal about them. So after you shared that personal, whatever it was, you're no longer a stranger. You're building a connection, and that's so important to not be strangers for longer than one day. Right, Kip, do you want to say something?
I was just going to say, everything that we're talking about is easing the anxiety on that first day. We know psychologically when someone is anxious, their thinking is constricted and their learning is impeded. So everything we can do to set people at ease, to let them know they're welcome, is going to increase their chance of what they're able to learn and take on as they go forward.
I even like very much what Wylea said about that confirmation that this is where I want to be. When employees come on board, they want confirmation that they've made the right decision. They want confirmation that this is where they want to be. And you think about all the phone calls that a new employee probably gets from their friends, from their family, and from their former coworkers and company. And what is it that they ask them? How was your day?
Yeah.
How is it going? How do you want your new staff member to answer that question? And that is what you want to provide. You want to provide them with the resources, the tools, the connection, and that assurance that they need to be able to give a positive answer and to say, this is where I want to be.
And while it is true, we can't fake who we are for very long, right? So as organizations, we can't just put on makeup and pretend to be who we aren't. It's not going to last very long. So what do we do about that?
That is very true. And of course, we all try to put on our best smile sometimes and, put out our best foot forward. But, those setting of expectations really start back when the new staff member was first applying for the position and interviewing. The last thing that you want to have is to have an environment, have a culture, have even a management style that is something other than what you have communicated during the interview process. The interview process is the time to have those conversations and to figure out, from a skills perspective, from a responsibilities perspective, job function, management style, work style, organizational culture, is this a good fit? The candidate should be trying to figure that out about the organization, and the organization should be trying to answer that question at the time of the interview. So by the time the person comes into the organization, I want to say the word that it's too late to try to figure that out. At that point, you should have had those discussions, and you should be working to put things in place to support all of the areas where either more support may be needed. So maybe the candidate was the best candidate for the position, but maybe there was one skill that they could use some additional assistance in. I know this going in, so it is for me to then come up with the mechanism that I'm going to use to support that staff member in improving on that skill. And that should actually be a conversation that I've had prior to even that person coming on board. So if that person knows they're coming on board, and maybe they need more assistance, and I'm just going to use, maybe they are formatting documents and they might need some assistance in Word, then I should be able to say, and one of the first things that we're going to have you do is get some additional training in Word, and here's the way that we're going to do that.
So you turn it into an opportunity to provide support early on, so this person feels the organization in that way. So I may not be perfect, but I'm going to have the support. I'm going to be able to perform. I think that, Kip, do you want to say something?
I'm just going to say the importance of checking in with people in the onboarding process, recognizing that different people manage change differently. And some people really can take it on and they're ready to go and run with it. Some people manage it at a slower rate. So being able to check in and how are you doing? Are you being able to pick this up? Does this feel like a challenge? What can we do to help you with that challenge? Becomes very important as we go.
Yeah.
And I like what Jennifer talked about with it starts with the interviewing process. You know, one of the analogies Jennifer gave earlier when we were talking was that, you know, you put your best foot forward when you have guests over and maybe you shove everything into one room, you know, because you're not going to be there that long and you want your house to look its best. But, you know, you want this new employee, when you bring them on, to be a long, I guess it stays a long time. And they're eventually going to discover that messy room or the junk drawer that everybody has in their kitchen. Or is it just me? And, you know, but you want to mention things and be realistic and honest in the interview process. And that was one of the things that stood out to me during my interview process with Leadership Montgomery was our president and CEO, C. Marie Taylor, said, you know, we're a small staff doing big things. We are really, really busy. How are you going to manage that? You know, if you're on your way to a meeting and someone calls you, how do you manage your time? What are you going to do? Things like that. And that stood out for me because that was honest, you know, and she didn't paint a picture that, you know, we're all around skipping daisies and the work gets done by the fairies who come in later on. You know, she was honest and she was talking about, she was basically conveying Leadership Montgomery's expectations. And then I was able to convey what mine were, you know, and how I could meet their expectations and how I wanted mine met. And that stood out to me. And that was honesty from the beginning. It was shared in a manner that wasn't scary, but it was, it meant a lot to me, you know, and I think that also with the onboarding process, if it's successful, it's something, to Kip's point, that continues, you know, and one of the things that a touch point for the person that I report to, our Vice President of Philanthropic Investments, Dana Pauly, is at the end of each of our weekly one-on-one sessions, she says, how can I support you? How are things going? She checks in, you know, and so for me, it's an extension. I'll be there a year by the end of January 2020. And that's been an extension of, it's a constant check-in. It's not something that, oh, well, you're here now. We've got you in our clutches. You're on your own, but still be successful here, you know, sort of thing. I like to frame it as, it's consistent in helping me to be successful in this organization, which then helps the organization to be successful as a whole.
Yes, effective onboarding is a competitive advantage. And
I agree.
Especially in this area that we're working in, you know, we are competing for talent with the companies next door, the companies down the block, and not only retaining people, but also having employees that have referrals and want to bring other people in.
Right.
And so having a successful onboarding program also helps us to attract and retain additional people just through word of mouth. And those are some of your best referrals, actually, and the best ways to get new candidates.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like building connections also not only with your supervisor that is checking in on how you're doing, but also with other members of the company. And I really like the idea of the Jumpstart program that Leadership Montgomery offers. Can you talk about that, Wiley?
Yes, our Employee Volunteer Jumpstart program is a program that is designed to connect businesses and leaders to corporate engagement and community volunteer engagement in Montgomery County. And so we partner with companies and with nonprofit organizations. The partnership part of my title is not only building but nurturing relationships with nonprofits in Montgomery County so that I know their needs, wants, and gotta haves is the way I phrase it. So that when a company is interested in giving back to the community that gives to them so much, I can say, oh, well, there's a nonprofit that I can partner you with that has this need, and here's how we're going to structure it. And I also manage the expectations of the nonprofit and of the company. So, you know, both know what to expect. And, you know, and with the Employee Volunteer Jumpstart program, MS has done an awesome job of introducing that as a benefit, you know, on day one. You know, that this is something that it lets you know that this is something that is a part of the mission and the goal and the culture of the company when you have it from on high. You know, and I think, again, it goes back to the confirmation of this is where I want to be. You know, this is the place that speaks to not only my, you know, getting my creative juices flowing as far as work, but also that outside of work, they care about that,
Yep.
you know, and it's a part also of the branding for the company, right? It goes back to a circle of success. It not only meets the needs of the employee, but it also meets the company's needs because they're a company. They want to grow. It's still business, you know, and so, but connected with this company is that they care and that they have this mission of giving back. Every company, by and large, wants to give back to the community, maybe doesn't know how, maybe doesn't have a program, maybe has individual employees who do volunteer, but not in a structured way, and the Employee Volunteer Jumpstart Program helps that to happen.
Sounds like a triple win.
It's definitely a triple win, you know, and this speaks to the fact that employees want to be connected. They want to feel engaged. They want to feel as though the work that they do is valuable. And that, again, is where it's very important. And we talked about this a little bit earlier of connecting how the job that an employee actually is doing is connected to the overall values of the organization and the goals that the organization is trying to achieve. But they also need to be connected from a more social standpoint to get that true engagement. And that means by feeling as though they have some sort of, I'll go back to the word relationship, with others that they work with, peers, leadership, whatever that may be. And, you know, through Leadership Montgomery CVC and the Jumpstart program, MS has truly benefited from that by not just having a program that is linked to our core value, which is improving public health, but having a mechanism where employees can see that we practice what we preach. We actually build in to our orientation on the first day time where we talk about the Employee Volunteer Program, but it also gives them an opportunity to meet new staff members that they may not already know. It gives them a chance to do things outside of the organization. And because we have done so many different types of volunteer and community service projects that are employee-driven, it's something that truly connects with them. And so, again, it's a win-win-win, and then another win for the community and for the people that they serve as well.
Yeah,
And it's so good to hear that the employee side, because what we hear outside of MS is just, this is a great company doing great things for the community. That's all we perceive.
Yeah, and I think that, like Jennifer said, it is a win all the way around. And I think that one of the big words for me is grace, and that, you know, I think that the employer and the employee need to give grace. You know, a lot of times an employer wants someone who can hit the ground running, you know, and so there's this built-in pressure where you want to prove yourself, you know, and you want to get it all done and you want to get it all done now. But if we're giving each other grace, then we're building in that sort of supportive, you know, system where, yeah, we want you to hit the ground running. However, there's a culture that you have to get to know in an organization, right? And what better way to do that than with something like an Employee Volunteer Jumpstart program, where you have an opportunity to get to know your coworkers, some that you work directly with and some that you don't, outside of the work environment, in the community, maybe in the community that you live, but certainly the community that you work in Montgomery County, and partnering with these nonprofits that maybe you didn't even know existed in Montgomery County and doing the work. And so, again, getting to know your fellow coworkers outside of work and getting to know the mission of the organization, truly getting to see it in action and learning the culture of the organization. And I think that it's just another win because it benefits the organization, benefits you, everybody wins.
It's a way to internalize values.
It certainly is, and I think that's the ultimate goal of the onboarding. Is we're not simply trying to get people to tick off boxes of, you know where the bathroom is, you know how to handle the phone system or the computer system, but we're working towards getting people able to internalize the values and the practices that are connected with the mission and the purpose of the organization.
Yeah.
I would also add that just in terms of research backing up the importance of this social engagement, that a meta-analysis has been conducted of 70 separate studies, and it showed that feeling socially accepted was a key factor in newcomer success. That's that element of grace that Leah was talking about, that people need work that is meaningful, but sometimes there are parts of work that aren't always our favorite, but we can endure that if we feel like we've got a work home where we're socially accepted, where we're working with people who care about us and with whom we care. And that can make a huge difference in morale and in the way we internalize the mission of the organization.
Yeah.
And truthfully, some of us are so busy, we're not paying enough attention to the onboarding process and our own companies. And I think we can't afford to do that because the cost, as research shows, is too high to lose a good person that was going to come to the team and
Right.
to lose them right after you oriented them.
Yeah.
And
Well, and the training that goes along with it, the changes in the workflow that have taken place. And it's not just, the cost for that one person who you spent time looking for and onboarded. Many organizations stop the search process after that. They've changed, and so that's restarting that engine again, which does take time. But also when you think about it, especially if you're in a work environment where the people who are working with that individual have been looking forward to them coming on board because it meant opportunity for them. And so when you think about what happens when you lose that person and how the people who have now lost and feel that loss of that opportunity could have been a promotion opportunity for them. It may have been a supervision opportunity for them. It may have been a way for them to just offload some of the additional work that they have been doing and relief for them. They all understand that that's all going to come back. And so not only do you risk, turnover with that one position, but you risk turnover amongst other people in your staff as well. So as much as it benefits organizations to successfully onboard, I think just across the board, all companies really need to do a better job of looking at it, again, as this competitive advantage and something that we definitely want to put our resources into and our full support into because it really does carry the employee throughout the rest of their tenure, and it helps to retain not just them, but the rest of your organization as well.
Right. And BESA has put on the link on the sidebar a link to the Jumpstart program because somebody was asking how do we learn more about it. So, and we're also going to send it with materials. But there was something else that you were saying, Jennifer, the language that we use, the whether we refer to orientation or onboarding or probation.
But
Trial period.
Yeah, trial period. The words that we use when we're describing the process to bring a new employee on board and the time that it takes for them to get acquainted with the organization and their job, and for us to get acquainted with them, we need to choose those words very carefully because there is a connotation that goes with the word orientation, just like there's one that goes with the word probation. I know that at MS we use the word orientation. We think that has a positive, connotation to it, and it truly, is a time for both the organization and the staff to get to know one another and to orient one another into the ways that we work. Probation sends out a completely different tone and message. And if that's the message and the tone that a company or organization chooses to use, then they just need to be aware, again, of each of those words and the signal that it does send to staff.
Yeah, it's very descriptive of the culture, probably. Maybe that's a question that an applicant should ask in the interview process. What do you call your onboarding? That might be very telling.
That's actually a really good point. Yeah. So would you be proud to tell your applicant, the name of your onboarding process?
Yeah, because you may find yourself in probation without knowing it.
Which sounds like you're starting out in the doghouse.
Yeah, exactly.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. Exactly. So what are some rituals, some normal practices that we should have? There's a lot of checklists out there, but we're moving away from the checklist and going to the human side here, the parts that may go unnoticed of the onboarding process. Anything else we haven't talked about?
We've talked about a lot of, I'd call them rituals. I think the important thing to think about when it comes to rituals, though, is, again, just make them meaningful to your organization and make sure that they speak to who you are. Kip talked about the decorating. Wailea, you talked about, the people who, meet in the conference room because you're small enough. MS is a much larger organization, and I'm sure all of our employees would love to have lunch every time we have a new hire, but, we have the supervisor and then another staff member, and then maybe another other party, and they normally take them out to lunch. But I think that, you know, but that's our culture. There's a personal touch there. That's our culture. Our employees love to go to the places that are around to eat, and we also want to be able to show employees that, hey, you know, we are metro accessible. We do have all the amenities that we talked about during our orientation, and here some of them are. So that's just an opportunity to show them around and to get out of the office too. So I think just making sure that whatever ritual it is speaks to you as the organization, because again, you don't want to present a picture of life that is not going to be like that, you know, in the weeks and months and years to follow.
It's not sustainable, huh? And you don't want to oversell yourself so that you can't meet expectations that are too high.
Yeah, we have lots of events for, you know, our Leadership Montgomery graduates from the core program, Student Leadership Montgomery, and Emerging Leaders Program and things like that. We have all sorts of events. We have the CDA Awards Luncheon, all kinds of opportunities to go out, to meet and greet. But, you know, to Jennifer's point, different organizations do it differently, but I think as long as it has a personal touch, something that's mindful, you know, it's something that you put some thought into, some care into. And it can be extravagant and still be mindful, but again, mindful. You know, we knew you were coming. We expected you. Welcome.
And I feel that in all the Leadership Montgomery events, because I'm a difficult person. I'm vegan. So whenever there's food served, I'm likely not to have the right meal. But with every meeting that I go with Leadership Montgomery, there's always a vegan meal that it's substantial. It's not the salads that someone put aside. So it really, those details are very, very important. Okay, I think we have 25 more minutes and we can move to offboarding now. So offboarding, what do we mean by offboarding? What situations are we covering here?
Yeah, I think offboarding is, someone's offboarding is really determined by their context. For example, there's going to be a big difference between someone who's leaving because they're retiring or moving to another job versus someone whose job has been eliminated or is being asked to leave because they're not a good fit. So the circumstances around that is going to be highly important and will determine in some ways how.
Oh, okay. I think you lost me for a few minutes. I was saying that we're trying to create a process that we can have in the easier situations when someone is retiring or is moving to a different job in a different part of the world, or another one when positions are eliminated. So we're going to talk about all of them right now.
What's true across the board for all of them is the importance of treating someone with dignity, no matter what the circumstances are. And part of that, I think Jennifer's mentioned in a different context, is communicating about and being clear about expectations, what the expectations are for the person as they're offboarding, you know, dealing with or their privacy, confidentiality matters around files, you know, will you be asked to be training someone else as you leave, those kinds of considerations. But as much as you can, treating that person in a dignified way. I think most people can get what reasons might be around someone's offboarding, but they'll really appreciate if they've been treated as a human being through that process and not dismissed with euphemisms or language that isn't helpful.
Actually, most lawsuits against companies come from people who were not treated with kindness. So that's a very strong incentive for all companies to try to be gentle in this process.
Well, absolutely. I think that respect and dignity go, you know, just through the entire time that an employee, you know, is with you from the beginning all the way through the end. And the themes that we talked about in the beginning, when you're onboarding someone, holds true to the end in terms of just that openness, the honesty, the setting people's expectations of, you know, what is to happen after they leave. Because similarly, just because when a person comes on board and they're asked how did it go. If people leave, they're asked the same question, how did it go? And you still have opportunities, even for people who have left the organization for, let's just say it's not necessarily retirement, but maybe, the job has been downsized. Maybe they have had a performance issue. It is possible to get a positive referral from a person who has left because of those reasons based on the way that the organization has treated them on their way out. And I do understand that there are different, times when you can provide more or less information about the reason why someone is has been let go, or there's, different, timing that takes place when it comes to things like downsizing. But those, times when you can give more people more time to acclimate and get used to things, we'll speak about retirement. We'll talk about maybe even someone's just decided to go and take a position elsewhere. Those are the times, and even there are some times when a position has been eliminated, there actually is some timing involved where that person can become more ready to leave, that we should use that to, the best advantage of the staff member in terms of them being ready to transition, because that is also a very stressful process, getting the organization ready. And I think sometimes we also forget the coworkers that are working with that person, and even in times that are, that we celebrate like retirement, there's still a stress there. There's the stress of for the person who's retiring, what do I do next? But there's also that stress of the people who are within the organization who may be saying, okay, well, what's going on with this position? What about all this work that is happening here? How is that going to get done? And especially when we're looking at times like retirement, our employees and our staff oftentimes don't want to say, hey, but what about all this extra work? But it's something as managers we can address proactively to help to relieve some of the anxiety that might accompany that.
Right. Then create a succession planning that incorporates that, because a lot of times when people have worked for a very long time in an organization, they have the institutional memory that is not anywhere else but in their heads about so many things. So how do we prepare others to not feel that it will be a loss anyways for everybody? Do you want to talk about that?
I think it's important to recognize that loss. Another thing that I would add, companies tend not to put as much thought and attention into offboarding as they do onboarding, simply because people are leaving. And I think that's short-sighted. Bad offboarding can affect the company's reputation. We now know it's just a couple of keystrokes to LinkedIn and Glassdoor, and a disgruntled person can begin to have an impact publicly on how a company is viewed. So it becomes very important, if for no other reason, to recognize the importance of the time and energy that goes into offboarding.
And it's personal choice. I think that especially if we have a group that has a lot of work going on, and we have a key staff member who decides that they would like to resign and wants to move on to another organization, that is the most important time, that showing them that you can be graceful in the exit can actually enable a return. So oftentimes employees leave thinking that they may want another opportunity, and you don't want to close that door, because they will often come back if they find that what they thought was going to be, because maybe the company that they're going to did not have an effective onboarding strategy. Maybe the company that they spoke to did not do the things that we're talking about right now in terms of being honest and, really being transparent in the work and the effort that was going to be expected of them. Then those people can return, and that happens so often within the organization.
Yeah, it really does. Deloitte won our CBA awards, at our CBA luncheon last year, and was a keynote speaker. And they have an awesome volunteer program as their organization. And their offboarding process is such that if, especially an employee who is valued and works well, comes to them and says, hey, I want to leave, one of the things that they ask is, well, without getting too personal, and if you're comfortable, can you share why? and they go on to say that we really value you, we really value your work here. What can we do to keep you? And they share opportunities within the organization. So we would really love you to stay here in this line of business, but if you don't feel that you then can we introduce you to some other lines of business, to other areas of the organization? So, as much as they would like to have them there, they would still benefit from having them in the organization at large, rather than to leave altogether. And so that's another, offboarding opportunity. I like to say it's an opportunity where you can still maybe retain that person, to Jennifer's point, and maybe they'll come back to that line of business, but they feel valued, they feel seen, they feel heard. And maybe they had a perception that, was incorrect, but you've cleared that up. And, if it still doesn't work out, then one of the things that they do is say, well, we wish you well, the door is open, it was great. And 9 times out of 10, just like my husband, they do come back. And he did come back.
Yeah.
At Montgomery Hospice, we have what we call humorously the Boomerang Award, and it goes around to different people who have gone somewhere else and come back.
And sometimes they even come back, and it may be years, when they come back. It might be timing, but the skill sets that they may have acquired, and they just think, you know what, now is the time to go back, because maybe they have done the development, or they've gotten experience within another industry that they've wanted. So always keeping that door open, always maintaining lines of communication. With social media now, that makes it so much easier. People have, organizations have Facebook pages, they have Instagram. So I know that at MS we use our Instagram account and our LinkedIn account, rather, to send out job openings. And so that is also a way to stay in touch with people who have left.
Yeah.
Interesting. I want to talk about the financial implications of trying to move someone you already know how good it is to a different position and offer growth within the company, rather than embarking on a new adventure, bringing someone you might not know what you bring. So I think it's a very financially advantageous move on the side of companies to value the human capital they have. That because it takes, I do this math for Montgomery Hospice, how much it costs to orient someone to, because it takes for an industry like ours, it takes months with preceptorship and all of these to get someone fully competent, especially the nurses. May not come with previous experience.
So you're saying it's cheaper to keep them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a good move.
Yeah. No, it is. And this is where, again, those dialogues really make a lot of sense. It is, it's definitely cost advantageous to retain your quality talent. And that's why those dialogues throughout their tenure about what their expectations are, what their career development path and goals are also very important. To get to the point where someone is leaving, and just then try to have a discussion about, well, what is it that you really want to do? That, again, speaks to how much importance you put and value you put on that during that employee's tenure. And they know this. They realize this. And so, it's important for them to have already had that information along the way. And then, it also just speaks to, again, that idea of compensation, and having those dialogues and just making sure you're truly understanding what it is that the employee is seeking when they are leaving, and making sure that they are staying for the right reasons, as well as, making sure that they believe that they're leaving for the right reasons.
Right. And conversely, though, I think it's important for an organization to have that sort of culture where the employee feels that there is openness to hearing that, I'm coming to you because I'm not happy with what I'm doing. I would like to grow in this area, things like that. So that I think it works on both ends, because you don't want to hear, when they're leaving that they weren't happy, because you didn't know. So I think that you have to have, an organization has to have that culture where an employee can feel like they can come and say, I'm not happy here. Are there other opportunities, things like that, and that the employer is open to receiving that and hearing that, and that the employee doesn't feel like if they do that, there's a negative backlash. So I think, it can go both ways.
Right. I like that because we have this boomerang award here in Montgomery. But, sometimes the grass looks greener on the other side, but when you go there, it might not.
I think there's a couple of other things that can soften what might appear to be a hard time for an offboarding. One is to be as affirmative as you can. Be honest, but be as affirmative as you can. Everyone has something of value that they're bringing to work. A particular person may not be a good fit in a particular situation, but affirming what you do see that's good and what they've offered and what value they have, I think is an important human thing to honor someone's dignity. The other thing is being as flexible as you can be with them, giving them say. Sometimes you can have some flexibility about exactly when someone's leaving or how you want to frame the announcement, things like that. And giving someone some say, if you can, and have that flexibility also helps them to feel a little bit of empowered when they're feeling low in that area.
That's a very good point. Those are for the hard offboarding situations that you can still find something good about the person to communicate and share that and validate that. And yes, I'm looking at our menu of options here. We have one that we put here, a bullet, creating an identity for retirement. And this is because some people that are workaholics, it seems that their professional identity takes over the entire life, and this is important too. I heard it from someone who had a very hard time retiring. She said, I wish I had started building my identity away from the office earlier. And do you want to talk about that in the retirements that you've seen or offboarding processes?
Yeah, we have people like that who are in particular part of the senior leadership program with one of the leadership programs at Leadership Montgomery. It's for people 55 and over, and some are transitioning into retirement or have retired, and they're looking for new identity. They're looking for new ways to be involved, right? And there are some people who have retired and onto a second career, and so this provides an opportunity for them to find out what's out there, what other people are doing, to find out what's going on in the county in which they live. I've heard a lot of people who've been a part of Senior Leadership Montgomery, again, age 55 and over, who were raised in this county and didn't know a lot about the county until they went through this program. But again, it helped them to transition into retirement. I've heard that a lot. And so I met some people at Emmis's volunteer fair that they had a couple of Saturdays ago who were at the fair, and I was talking to them about the different programs. And this one woman grabbed my hand and she said, oh my goodness, I haven't retired yet. I'm retiring soon, but my husband is retired and he doesn't know what to do with himself. I want him to do this program. And then she said she has a girlfriend who's also going to be retiring, and she has no clue what to do outside of work. And so she's been delaying her retirement, even though she's exhausted, she just doesn't know what to do. So having these things that you can tell your employees about, as they're making the transition from retiring, I think is a benefit, I think.
Yeah, and Welia, you really speak to also, I think, one of the common occurrences that happen in organizations when people are retiring is that ongoing dialogue about retirement. And this is the individual who has decided to retire. They've said that they are going to retire, but they haven't quite picked a date yet. Or they do pick a date and then it moves and it moves and it moves. And this really doesn't speak to the fact that it has nothing to do with not wanting them there. You want them there. Right. They're productive, they're good, but there is this, again, conversation and this dialogue that's now going on within that department at staff of, well, so-and-so says they're going to retire. They said they're going to retire 6 months from now, 3 months from now, 1 year, and it creates this uncertainty. And it creates this uncertainty within, among staff members that can and should be, I think, have a conversation around just in terms of timelines. And so I think that retirement conversation is interesting. And so for some people, it goes on for years, about that. And I think, though, but just having, again, that continuous open dialogue, never, ever, ever, trying to portray like, oh, well, you should retire. That is never a conversation or a way of speaking with someone. It's more about when you are ready, Do you want to set up a timeline? And that way, by having some sort of timeline, you're again setting expectations for everyone about when work may transition, especially maybe if it's a leadership position and people are worrying what's going to happen. But just continuing to have that dialogue and being realistic and knowing that these people are human, their identity, and this has been to the organization's credit over the years, has become the organization. They've helped make that organization successful. If it wasn't for the fact that they were so tied to that organization, the organization may not be where it is today. So we need to recognize that, and again, have that compassion, have that sensitivity when we're having those conversations and those dialogues, and just be aware of that. And so that's extremely, extremely important.
Right. Yeah.
Yep, and be flexible.
Right.
Yeah.
One way to frame that conversation might be in terms of someone's empowerment, saying something like, we want you to be able to go out on your own terms in ways in which you can talk about that. We don't want you to wait to the point where it might become uncomfortable, where there might have to be hard decisions made and that won't feel good. We want to be able to celebrate you as you go out in your own way. So how can we make that happen in terms of a timeline, as Jennifer talked about, in terms of support and that kind of
Those are nice words to use.
No, they are. And, I just think about the fact that if I've spent, I've been with my organization for 14 years, and I'm still a newbie. People have been there for 20 years, 25 years. But if I've spent all of that time with an organization, the way that I lead that organization would be very important to me, just as a person and as an individual. And I would want to do, from a company standpoint, the best I could to make sure that that person feels appreciated when they go. And when I say that, the other things, that I also think about, too, is, when you look at retirement and maybe some of the rituals that you have around retirement, making sure that you share those rituals with everyone who retires. And that can be an interesting dynamic within a corporation. Big department, small department, large company, or, wherever they are. If someone, is retiring and maybe they have been in a part of a department that's had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, you can see the difference between what their send-off may be and someone who may have had a department of 3. So at least from a company perspective, if you're going to give a retirement gift or something like that, many organizations do that, making sure that people get things that are very are the same or equitable, knowing that people within their departments will, celebrate them differently.
That's a very important fairness, right? It's perceived as. Do you have an onboarding ritual your company would like to share?
No, Monica, that was a question to the attendees. We do have one that came privately to me. Can you talk a little bit more about buddy programs or signing ambassadors to a new employee and whether or not that is effective?
There's a question that came up.
About buddy programs or signing ambassadors.
People up for work, whether that's effective.
Oh,
Sure.
They are extremely effective. So our buddy programs, are pairing people up who are new with other individuals. I think that is a great idea in order to not only make that social connection that we talked about that's so important, but also just that work connection and what you do. So many of our departments do partner new employees up with a peer that basically just shows them the ropes. Everything from, if you need IT support, where the bathrooms are, what the shortcut is to go to a certain eating area, and, just the ins and outs of the organization. And that, I think, is extremely conducive to building those relationships, making people feel more at ease, and also giving the person who they are paired up with, I think, a sense of, I would say, engagement as well. And it could even be seen from some of the maybe newer staff members or those who don't have as much from a title standpoint, so like a peer standpoint, just kind of the ability to kind of move up and be more like mentors as well. And so I think it's a great opportunity for everyone.
yeah.
Sounds great. And we have 1 more minute left. And our last bullet on the offboarding says a ritual for transition. Kip, can you offer?
Jennifer's mentioned several thoughts along that line. the rituals can be formal things, gatherings, the presentation of a gift, something like that. And I agree with Jennifer that we need to be consistent in the way that that's applied across an organization. But they can also be more informal. A few friends that got particularly close in the workplace can go out and do something or find some way to ritualize that passage. So it's really up to the organization, up to the situation, to the person and what they're willing to do. Some people are fine with a big gathering. Some people say, no, don't make any fuss over me. I'll just quietly go out the back door on Friday afternoon. So being able to be sensitive to people and what they need as well. I often think of that famous quote from Maya Angelou. I've learned that people will forget what you said, will forget what you did, but will never forget how you made them feel. And I think that's true when we think about offboarding and onboarding as well.
It's a beautiful thought to close our webinar today. We were asking for questions, but I don't see any more questions on the chat box. We said at 1 hour. We are right on the hour. Thank you very much. And for the people listening, we are going to send them resources. Definitely the Jumpstart resources. And as for the Center for Learning, we are recruiting new candidates for a certificate in end of life. If you are interested in learning more about end of life education, we are offering that. We are graduating the first class. This is the Montgomery Hospice Center for Learning on September 24th, and that's announced here. On October 10th, we have medical cannabis usage at the end of life. That's our next webinar. But for the series of the Well Workplace webinar, we are going to offer another webinar. I think it's in November, and we're going to talk about the holidays and how it affects wellness of our employees, and what can be done to carry our employees through the holidays in one piece and hopefully not very stressed. So don't forget that you will have to complete an evaluation today, which is on the link, sent electronically. It's on the right-hand sidebar. There's a question if we can use it for social work CEUs.
Yes,
we can.
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay, that's all I have. I'm going to turn it on to Besa. Besa?
Well, thank you so much, Monica, and our panelists. This is such an educational webinar, even to me. I've learned a lot just as someone who's gone through the onboarding process and has also been part of the onboarding process of a new employee. I've learned many new things that I would hopefully implement in the future. For those of you who are still with us, if you can quickly please complete an evaluation. Your feedback and comments help us improve our program, so we highly encourage you to take just a few minutes. It wouldn't take more than 2 minutes to fill out the evaluation. My colleague Meghna and Mindy would be sharing the link. You can just complete it electronically if you can't do that. Earlier today, I sent out an email, and there should be an attachment, a PDF attachment of the evaluation. Go ahead and complete it and fax it to Meghna. And yeah, thank you for doing that ahead of time. This does count as an elective for the certificate in end-of-life care program that Monica just mentioned. For those of you who are not familiar with the certificate in end-of-life, it is Montgomery Hospice Center for Learning's certification program that is very comprehensive, affordable, and it's very centered on providing a well-rounded education on end-of-life care. And if you're interested in learning more about that program, we're going to share a link, which my colleague Mindy just did, and we will also provide more resources in the follow-up. Any of the research and resources that our panelists shared today would also be included in the follow-up you will get from me today. Again, thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who've signed up, it is a Category 1 social work CEU. For those of you who have signed up for continuing education credits, you would receive your certificate within the next 2 weeks. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.